Hey guys, I'm Beth and this is Read Remark, and today we are going to do a December reading wrap-up. Thank you so much for joining today. I am Beth. This is the Read Remark Booktube channel, and today I'm going to do a wrap-up of all the books that I read in the lovely month of December. So without further ado, let's just get right to it. The first one is 9 Perfect Strangers by Liane Moriarty. It's not my favorite. This was not my favorite of hers. Let me give you a quick rundown of the book. It has these 9 people. Not all of them are perfectly strangers to each other. Some of them are couples, but for the most part, they're strangers to each other. They go to this resort for a 10-day retreat. It's supposed to be a wellness retreat to allow them to do whatever they need to do to come back to themselves, whether it's heal emotionally, lose a few pounds, regain some confidence. Masha is the name of the Russian exacting person in charge of the retreat, and she has some very unorthodox methods to get these 9 people's lives turned around. And that is really where the story goes off the rails for me. The methods are kind of cringy. I don't want to give it away because I feel like it's kind of a turning point of the book where I personally was like, she did what? It was a bit much. So that was one minus that the book had to it, was that it just stopped being relatable and became kind of sensationalistic at that point. The other thing that I wasn't crazy about in this book is that 9 strangers is just too many strangers. In fact, between the strangers and then Masha and her 2 assistants, there were a lot of people to keep up with, and I noticed that even halfway through the book, we were still being introduced to people because there were just so many of them, and I couldn't really get to know them intimately the way that I'm usually able to do in a Liane Moriarty book. In fact, we could have lost at least a couple of the strangers and it wouldn't have really made any difference in the book. It probably would have made it that much richer. So like Carmel, for example, didn't really need to be there. Lars didn't really need to be there. Even the assistant who runs off halfway through the book and then we never really hear from her again, didn't really need her in the first place. Sorry, I'm so sorry, because I love her. I feel like what she did in Big Little Lies was touching and important and hit me in a way that was personal. Same thing with The Husband's Secret. I feel like that book was so compelling. That doesn't necessarily mean that I have to love every single book that the author puts out. You know how some people have instant buy authors that whatever they put out, they'll instantly buy it. It sounds like she's becoming whatever the movie version is of that. Whatever she puts out, people are ready to snap it up and put it into development. Toot sweet. I don't know if that's a wise thing to do, because there are a few things that are a little bit more of a miss than a hit for me. This is one of those. Another one is Truly Madly Guilty, that is also in development with Nicole Kidman and Reese Witherspoon. That's one of those books that just teases this ill-fated barbecue through the whole book. And it seemed like before the introduction to the book was even finished, I was like, get on with it. Move on to the barbecue already. I almost didn't care about what happened at the barbecue by the time it actually happened, because it had been teased so relentlessly throughout the book. Not my favorite. I still love the author. I'll still come back to her at a different book. The next book I read was Small Fry by Lisa Brennan-Jobs. And wowie wow, do I have some thoughts about this book. First of all, I'll say it was a very good book. Lisa Brennan-Jobs is the daughter of Steve Jobs, the illegitimate daughter. He did make an effort to be included in her life, or include her in his life. However, he was a deeply, deeply complicated man, Steve Jobs was, much like any other visionary genius artist. Deeply complicated. And for me, it's almost like having the glass shatter. I was a big Steve Jobs fan, personally. When he died, I literally cried because I was so heartbroken at the loss of this visionary genius brain that had done so much to change the very way that we live. I mean, think about your life pre-iPhone and post-iPhone. It's a completely different world we're living in, right? So I thought that was a big loss. However, hearing about how he was as a boss, how he was as a father to Lisa Brennan-Jobs, it sullies his legacy in a way that makes me feel deeply, deeply conflicted. Now, of course, I'm still an iPhone user. I still love my glorious iMac at home. You know, I think it's wonderful. Every time I switch to a PC and I can't AirDrop something to myself, I cringe. But I still feel so bad about what Steve Jobs was like, and I think about the price that people paid for that. You know, I read another book about, kind of indirectly about him recently, called Insanely Simple by Ken Follett. And this is a business nonfiction book about the concept of keeping things insanely simple based on the work that he did with Steve Jobs at Apple. It's a concept I very much subscribe to. I don't really believe in making things complicated just for the sake of making them complicated. So good concept there. However, the examples that Ken Follett gave in the book about Steve Jobs and how he would rule with an iron fist, and the way that the author seemed to try to explain that away seemed vaguely Stockholm Syndrome-y to me. All of that aside, it's just, you know, the whole thing makes me feel conflicted, not only about Steve Jobs, but about all of these artists that we're finding out may have these less than perfect personal lives. Of course, nobody has to be perfect. I don't expect that of anybody. I don't attain it personally, but I do believe in being a decent human being and making amends when we inevitably stumble in that endeavor. So it makes me wonder if, in liking all of this art by all of these people who did very, very bad things unabashedly, if that makes me complicit in their wrongdoings, or if I can still safely enjoy the art. So thinking about like Louis C.K., for example, I still think his comedy is funny. Or thinking about Pablo Picasso, and you know, his blue period touches me in a way that nothing else really is able to, and evokes that sense of melancholy, deep, deep melancholy from me that other pieces of art can't do. Does that make me complicit? Or can I kind of do a Roland Barthes version of this? I've talked about him before, and the death of the author, this concept. Can I just not even consider the author of this art and just enjoy the art for what it is? The answer to that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm still deeply conflicted over it, and I think in the climate that we're living right now, where the blinders are coming off about a lot of these things and these misdeeds, it's something that we're all going to kind of struggle with and think over for a while before we come to any sort of solution. Good book, sad book, of a great but also complicated man, and about his daughter. The next book is How to Be Safe by Tom McAllister, and this one is interesting because it's different than what I thought it would be. It starts off with a school shooting, and so I thought it was going to follow that, and it does for a little bit. It follows the shooting, the shooter, some of the victims individually, which I think is a really good thing to do. I thought the whole book would be about that, and it kind of was in a way, but eventually it became almost more of a background to the goings-on within our main character, Anna. Anna was a teacher at this school who was suspended at the time of the shooting. Initially, they thought that she was the perpetrator or somehow behind it, because when she had left the school, it was not under good terms. She was in the middle of a personal kind of free fall, but no, she was just kind of unhinged. And now that I'm saying this, I don't think that unhinged is really a fair word for her. I would say more that just bad things have always happened to her, and she's never really dealt with them in a good or healthy way, and so her life has just kind of been not great from the outset. So it's a really interesting character study from that perspective. At the same time, the book is also looking at the society, at the town, and their reaction to the shooting, and at the shootings at large that are happening throughout the country, and how they lose their minds collectively, and instead of doing anything that makes sense or looking at any sort of deeper issues that may be causing this, they just do everything that's crazy and insane, and they fall into this mob mentality of it. Now, I don't want to get into the debate of how it kind of mirrors what's going on in the real world right now, or whether it does. That's a whole other debate for a whole other time, and I am not wading into it on Booktube. But I will say that what Tom McAllister does here with this collective mentality and people collectively losing it is just so interesting. I'm going to read you a quick quote from it that I thought was so eloquently stated. Bear with me if you've watched my 12 Days of Lit videos recently. I read this quote on one of those as well. If you haven't, go check it out. Here's the quote. Ban everything besides guns. Ban public space. Ban buildings. Ban trigger fingers. Ban anger. Ban flesh and organs and blood loss. Ban women and children who are easy targets, and ban men who like to shoot at targets. Ban physics and ban velocity. Ban human interaction. You know, how to be safe? You can't. You can't really. And then the common sense things that we could put into place to be at least somewhat safer, whenever people are in danger, those things just completely fly out their heads, it seems like, and they refuse to look at that, or they politicize it to the point that it can't be done. It's just, it's a really good book that looks at how absurd everything is, and also looks at Anna. It was kind of interesting to get to know her. Interesting in that she is not a likable person at all. Not likable, but you know what? I don't have to like the book for the character. Wait, I don't have to like the character for the book to be good. In fact, I think unlikable characters make for some of the most interesting ones. And this indeed was that case, where it was really interesting to spend all these pages with a woman who just, oh, girlfriend, yeah. I also read North American Lake Monsters by Nathan Ballingrud, and boy, oh boy, is this book good. It is a collection of scary short stories. It takes these people who are living in these different everyday life scenarios and then throws a deeply supernatural element into it. The thing that really ties these stories together, even though each story exists in its own universe, in its own separate setting, is that they all take these everyday lives that are so, you know, there's something so sad or twisted or despairing in their everyday lives that this deeply supernatural element that is introduced into the story for each of these people seems almost secondary to the horror that is going on in their everyday lives. I'm going to give you a quick example with the title story, North American Lake Monsters. There's a man who has been released from prison recently, and he is staying at a cabin to reconnect with his wife and daughter. The man is not a pleasant person. We see into his mind. He's deeply narcissistic. He's verbally abusive. We get the impression that he could possibly be physically abusive as well. He's quick to anger, quick to violence, and just makes life miserable for the people around him. While they're at the cabin, they go down to the lake and find this dead lake monster on the shore. The lake monster is iridescent and glowing with these different colors, and you see all the different creatures in the woods that have come to, you know, feed on him and walk away with this glowing crap on them. Maybe there's something that's going to be introduced into the environment that could be either a good or bad force, poison, or could be nothing at all. But really, the thing that I keep thinking about in this story is his daughter, his teen daughter, and what's going to happen with her, because she's living with a very likely alcoholic mom and this dad who is quick to anger and very impulsive, and life is not looking good for that poor girl. That's the main thing I keep thinking about, more than this iridescent monster. And that's really the way that most of these stories go, is I get so wrapped up in the people's lives that it's just fascinating what the author does. Really, really good collection of stories. Now, if you are a horror aficionado like me, you will enjoy this very much. If you're not, then your comfort level may be a little bit differently skewed, and you may think that these stories go a little too dark. So you've been warned. You know, they're not gentle at all. They do not go gentle into that good night. They go violently, cursingly dead into that good night. That's a weird analogy. I would also encourage you to go check out the other 2 books that I read this month that I have made Booktube videos for. That would be Less, the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction winning book by Andrew Sean Greer, which is kind of a modern day Odyssey retelling that follows a man named Arthur Less as he tries to mend his broken heart and also find some coming of age for himself as he stumbles into the age of 50. Also, The Italian Teacher by Tom Rachman, which I just love so much because I keep thinking about this character Pinch and his life and how miserable it seemed in the book, but how softly, quietly triumphant it was as well. Pinch lived in the shadow of his artist father and never quite realized any sort of fame, acclaim, or even satisfaction in life, and it just is such a good book. Such a good book that I think we're going to be hearing more of from my own mouth, if not from others as well. So those are a couple more that I would recommend you go check out if you would like to get more in-depth thoughts on those books. And otherwise, I am done for this month. Let me know what you read, if you have any books that you also like. Thank you so much for those of you who did bear with me with the 12 days of Litmus. It's probably not easy to see my face every single day for 12 days straight, but thank you for hanging in there with me. I appreciate it as always, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.